amount of rowing back by the US State Department can change that what the United States President intimated earlier on this week amounts to ethnic cleansing. Is the UK government of the same view that what his plan would amount to, if prosecuted, would be ethnic cleansing? And if not, what does the UK government understand ethnic cleansing to be? And I've heard an awful lot of warm words from the government and ambition about what we believe in, what we stand for, what we've delivered around the immediate humanitarian crisis. But don't let's forget that the horrors that have happened over the last 18 months are because of the vacuum that has been created by international inaction over the plight of the Palestinians for the last 50 years. What will this government do to change that drastic situation?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I did list the decisions that the UK government took, which were different from those of the previous government a few moments ago. We have been determined to ensure that when it comes to the ICC and the ICJ, for example, that we're very clear about their jurisdiction, that also we remove that ban on UNRWA funding as well, and that we've supported, for example, moves at the UN through the Security Council that have been specifically focused on trying to push forward the two-state solution that is so important. And, Mr. Speaker, I'd refer to my previous remarks about the Prime Minister himself underlining the importance of that right to return. Thank you.
The world is watching, and let us be clear in this House that how the UK reacts to this brazen attempt to further rip up international law today will echo for generations. 61,000 Palestinians killed, a ceasefire hanging on a thread, and a blueprint now to ravage Gaza, ethnically cleanse Palestinians and resettle the land. So can the Minister tell this House where exactly has diplomacy and refusing to sanction Israel led us when Palestinians are now facing mass expulsion, reoccupation and resettlement, all whilst the international rules-based order has been ripped to shreds?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his question. I believe it has been incredibly important for the UK to engage diplomatically in relation to this conflict. I think it's absolutely right that we have sought to work with partners on these issues, that we have supported, for example, statements within the UN Security Council, that we have worked with partners in the region, that we have sought to achieve change, that we've sought to ensure that that ceasefire which was agreed was achieved. The release of hostages, we need to see more release, that surge of aid into Gaza, and ultimately that we work with other countries towards the two-state solution that is so necessary. I believe that has been important, Mr. Speaker, and I believe that members in this House would not have forgiven the UK government if we had not engaged in those actions determinedly. He asked about the UK's position and referred to the situation in relation to right to return particularly. We again have stated this very clearly, indeed at the highest level, with the Prime Minister's statement on this yesterday, when he said that those who are literally walking through the rubble to try and get back to their homes and communities in Gaza must be allowed home. And of course, in saying that, he is restating international law, Mr. Speaker.
Get Malthouse.
But, Mr. Speaker, does the Minister not accept that how we got here is after 16 months of weakness and vacillation by this government and the one previously, as we contemplate, as she said, hundreds of thousands of people returning to their homes to dig their relatives out from under the rubble, the welcome return of hostages, the 40,000-odd orphans and even more amputees, does she not recognise that the hot air that we've heard from both governments, frankly, has got us to a situation where the Israelis are demolishing buildings in Jenin with people still inside them, and the President of the United States openly contemplating the forcible transfer of the Palestinians? And if she accepts that vacillation, could she, just for the avoidance of doubt, confirm a couple of things? First of all, are Arabs, and particularly Palestinians, entitled to the same protections under international law as everybody else? And secondly, do we still affirm our support for UN Security Council Resolution 3236, which guarantees the Palestinians safety, security and sovereignty in their own land? And if that's the case, when is she going to just stop just talking about it and actually take steps and action to enforce these matters in law?
So will the government now finally commit to an immediate recognition of a Palestinian state along the 1967 borders? The welcome ceasefire has given us the opportunity to flood Gaza with aid, but the freeze to US aid funding is reportedly impacting the humanitarian response as NGOs are forced to lay off aid workers. So will the Minister share what the impact has been on the humanitarian response in Gaza, including British-funded programmes, and what conversations is the government having with our American partners to persuade them that abolishing US aid would be a dire mistake?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for the important points that she has raised. Mr Speaker, the UK's position on the right to return could not be clearer. I quoted previously the Prime Minister's remarks on this, which were most definitely in strong relief that Palestinians who are going back to their homes and communities in Gaza must be allowed home, they must be allowed to rebuild, and of course that is in line with international law, Mr Speaker, so there's no doubt about the UK's position on this whatsoever. She asked about the position on recognition, Mr Speaker. I responded to that when it came to the words of my honourable friend who raised this urgent question. The UK has been clear around this, that we believe that it is important that both Palestinians and Israelis are able to have sovereignty that is required for them, able to have security that is necessary in order to live in peace, and we will ensure that the UK's decision around this on recognition is a contribution to the process towards a two-state solution that we desperately need.
Over the last 16 or so months, we have seen Palestinian people being displaced from their homes and communities, on many occasions, on not just once, but perhaps twice or three times. So for the President of the United States to suggest a further forced displacement seems to me to be not just illegal, but also incredibly cruel. In diplomacy, we believe that timing is everything. So in order to give the Palestinian people some protection from outside actors who seem to wish to dictate what should happen to them, is it not now the time that the international community and our government should recognise Palestine as a state and give it all the international supports and strengths that that gives it?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And my honourable friend was right to refer to the levels of displacement. As I said previously, Mr Speaker, 90% of the population of Gaza have been displaced. As she says, some twice or three times, some up to 9 times having been displaced. And when we consider the impact on whole families having to move so many times, Mr Speaker, I'm sure that we're all disturbed by that.
Does the Minister recognise that the lack of recognition of Palestine now is denying the protection that people across Palestine need?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. That protection is critically important at every stage, Mr Speaker. The UK government has been absolutely clear that we have seen too much far too much death and destruction in Gaza, Mr Speaker, that we are seeing now truly heart-rending scenes of people trying to return to communities that have been destroyed. We have seen over 46,000 people being killed, Mr Speaker. That population requires our support, and I do not believe that is contingent on political circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'd like to thank the Minister for her update yesterday. It's greatly appreciated. But would the Minister agree with me that we are standing on the precipice of a new, dangerous world order, leaving one behind that bases global peace on global justices that we have recognised? Because we have close to 48,000 Palestinian men, women and children being killed. Hundreds of thousands returning to once what was their homes to rubble, and as we speak, Minister, mothers are looking for their children in the rubble. Whilst at the same time, we have the most powerful man of the most powerful country in the world behaving like a gangster, talking about replacing these people from their land, replacing their homes with beachfront properties, creating casinos and a Riviera. Is this the time, Minister, where we categorically utilise the same words as we do for other conflicts and call this out for what it is, and that is the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people? And we must immediately put into place the recognition of a Palestinian state. Can we stand up to President Trump and tell him Gaza is not for sale? Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I stated in response to the previous question, the UK has been and will continue to be an advocate for the international rules-based order. That's incredibly important. We need to see those rules being upheld by all, and of course we will continue to advocate for that at the UN and in relation to all countries, Mr. Speaker. We've been very clear about our position. It must be possible for people to return. I agree with him about the horrendous situation so many Gazans are facing. We've already talked about this in this urgent question, Mr. Speaker, and I would just underline again what the Prime Minister said yesterday very clearly. When it comes to Gazans returning to their homes and communities, they must be allowed home.